Wildlife trapping has occurred in Florida for many decades. Advancements have been made in trapping technology and methods in recent years to address animal welfare and selectivity. The FWC has begun the process of evaluating rules that address regulated wildlife trapping in Florida and have developed some initial concepts that we are seeking your input on. The intent is to modernize and update the trapping rules to align with the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies' best management practices in support of effective, species-specific, and humane trapping methods. The Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, which we will be referring to as AFWA throughout the presentation, represents North America's state, provincial, and territorial fish and wildlife agencies to advance sound science-based management and conservation of fish and wildlife and their habitats in the public interest. Animal welfare is critically important to the FWC, and the AFWA best management practices prioritize animal welfare by limiting the risk of capturing unintended or non-target species, reducing injuries to animals while they are in a trap, and allowing for the potential release of trapped animals. Regulated trapping is a component of many wildlife management programs throughout the United States. Trapping is used to help protect imperiled species and is used to minimize threats to human and pet safety by reducing human-wildlife conflicts, negative impacts from invasive species, damage to property, and habitat degradation. Trapping is used to relocate animals to restore populations in areas where conditions are suitable for the species to thrive. Regulated trapping is a way to minimize public safety threats caused by wildlife around airports, as well as the removal of sick or diseased wildlife. Regulated trapping is recognized by wildlife managers as a beneficial management activity to maintain healthy wildlife populations, and information obtained from trapping can inform management decisions. Throughout the country, natural resource agencies recognize regulated trapping by licensed members of the public as a sustainable harvest of wildlife resources for food and other uses. As mentioned earlier, the FWC is beginning the process of evaluating existing rules. At this stage, we are listening and gathering feedback that will help us develop draft rules. Today's meeting is one of the tools the FWC is using to get input from those who have an interest in trapping in Florida. We are hosting 5 online public workshops at various times and days. Workshop dates and times are listed on myfwc.com/trappingrules. We are reaching out to stakeholders to ensure they are aware of the effort and the process we are using to gather feedback. The primary means of obtaining feedback is through our online public commenting tool. The tool outlines the same proposals and concepts you will see here today, but it allows written feedback on each item. The online public commenting tool is available on our website. Information from the online tool, stakeholder outreach, and these public workshops will be compiled, analyzed, and used to develop draft rules that will then be available for public review prior to their presentation to our Commission. As you can see in this slide, there are many parts of the FWC involved in this effort, along with a wide variety of groups, organizations, and individuals. FWC staff across the agency have organized this outreach effort and will use information obtained to create draft rules. We are relying on stakeholder groups and individuals who are involved in or have an interest in trapping to provide their feedback on the concepts and ideas that we are presenting here today. We hope people who want to know more about regulated trapping in Florida will take advantage of the outreach materials we provide on our website, as well as these public meetings. You have already been introduced to our facilitators from the Florida State University Consensus Center. The FWC contracted with them not only to facilitate these meetings, but to work with the University of Central Florida Institute for Social and Behavioral Sciences to develop the online commenting tool. UCF is hosting the commenting tool and will summarize all the input once complete. Currently, there is no registration requirement for people involved in trapping in Florida, and only those who trap fur bearers for sale of hides or parts are required to have a trapping license. One potential idea we would like your feedback on is a registration requirement. Anyone who sets or checks traps would be required to register for a no-cost trapping permit. People trapping at their home using 2 or fewer cage traps, or youth under 16 years of age, would be exempt from registration. Anyone commercially trapping fur bearers would continue to be required to have a trapping license. Currently, trapper training is not required in Florida. We suggest that anyone checking or setting traps must successfully complete 2 free online courses, the AFWA North American Basic Trapper course and the FWC Florida Trapper Rules training. A link to the AFWA Trapper training can be found on our website. If this idea is implemented, the Florida Trapping Rules training would need to be developed. Anyone trapping wildlife at their home using 2 or fewer cage traps or anyone using corral traps would be exempt from the required training. This training will help ensure that anyone using traps to capture wildlife is familiar with the proper use, resulting in greater catch selectivity and improved animal welfare. Existing rules do not require any data collection or reporting for trapping activities unless a special use permit is issued. One concept for consideration would be to require trappers to maintain a daily trapping log and submit an annual trapping report. The report information could include trap types and species caught. Data collected from trappers would help inform management decisions regarding wildlife and trapping. To minimize the time an animal might spend in a trap, we are suggesting traps must be checked by 11 a.m. every day. Additional changes being considered would require wildlife trapped for nuisance behavior to be released, relocated off-site, or humanely killed within 12 hours of trap inspection. Current rules allow up to 24 hours. To reduce the chances of non-target animals being caught, we would restrict the areas in which traps can be set, except for cage and corral traps. Traps would not be set within 300 feet of a structure used as a residence or business unless granted written permission by the owner or leasee, a federal, state, or county-maintained road, sidewalk, campground, picnic area, trail, boat ramp, or observation area, unless the trap is set to capture a nuisance wildlife or wildlife posing a threat to airport safety, a legal property boundary, unless granted written permission by the adjacent landowner or leasee. This restriction would not apply to properties of 10 acres or more. Existing rules have limited restrictions on design, size, and placement of traps. We are considering possible changes to reduce the capture of non-target species and enhance animal welfare by requiring traps to meet, or for some species exceed, AFWA's best management practices. In addition, considerations include where and how traps can be set. We will cover this in more detail after the break. Concepts under consideration would specifically state for who and under what circumstances deviations would be allowed. Deviations from the rules would only be permitted for certain activities, such as the recovery or protection of imperiled species, the restoration of game species as part of an FWC conservation program, the control of non-native or invasive species, or where there is a threat to public safety. These changes would make it easier for everyone to understand what deviations from the rules might be considered. Now we'll move on to the design, size, and placement restrictions under consideration by trap type. We'll begin with foothold and foot and close traps, which are live capture devices. Currently, foothold and foot and close traps may only be used with a special use permit. Under consideration is to provide additional details and stipulations in rule, so that special use permits would no longer be required for this trap type. The possible changes would require that these traps meet or be more stringent than the AFWA best management practices. Under consideration are requiring foothold traps to have smooth offset jaws with at least 1/4 inch gap when the trap is closed, or have manufacturer installed padded jaws. This requirement would not apply to the highly selective design of foot and close traps, as those function different than foothold traps. Both of these trap types would be required to have a swivel where the trap is attached to the anchor chain, and a swivel where the anchor chain meets the ground. The swivels would reduce the potential for injury. Also, an inline shock spring would be required if the chain is longer than 8 inches to also reduce the potential for injury. If set on dry land, a drag anchor would be allowed with this trap type, as it allows captured animals to reach nearby cover, and neither of these trap types could be set in a way that would allow a captured animal to become entangled in a fence or drown. The maximum jaw spread opening would be limited to 5.75 inches. In addition, having and using a catch pole or similar device would be required when checking traps and releasing non-target captures. All these specifications are intended to enhance animal welfare and allow for the release of non-target animals. These trap types would not be allowed to be set within 30 feet of hides, entrails, or carcasses, to avoid non-target captures of raptors or other scavenging animals. Body gripping traps are designed to quickly kill an animal that enters the trap. Currently, body gripping traps may only be used with a special use permit. Under consideration is to provide additional details and stipulations in rule so that special use permits would no longer be required for this trap type. To minimize non-target animal captures, we are considering that these traps only be placed in water and must be fully submerged. All body gripping traps would need to meet the AFWA best management practices, but we are considering being more restrictive on the maximum size of the opening by limiting the size to 10 inches or less. This size restriction will assist in minimizing non-target captures. Cable restraints are the next trap we will cover. This is a loop-style trap designed to hold a part of the target animal's body and humanely hold the captured animal alive. Currently, snares are allowed with minimal restrictions. Cable restraints are a type of snare. Possible changes being considered are cable restraints would need to be equipped with additional design features that make them more selective and humane. Again, as with all the other trap types, a cable restraint's proposed design, size, usage, and placement requirements would meet or exceed the AFWA best management practices for trapping. The design would have to be made from stranded metal cable, 1/8 of an inch or less in diameter, using either 7x7, 7x19, or 1x19 cable. That first number is the number of bundles of wire in the cable, and the second number is the number of wires in each bundle. In addition, the total length of the cable could not exceed 6 feet. These specifications would help ensure the device minimizes any injury to the captured animal. Additional considerations would prohibit the use of power-assisted cable restraints. That means the cable restraint cannot be launched to get the capture loop around a part of the animal. And further, each cable restraint would need to have a relaxing lock, an inline swivel, a 285-pound or less breakaway device, and loop stops. The relaxing lock on the capture loop is designed to prevent the cable from progressively cinching down. The inline swivel ensures the device won't become twisted when an animal is captured. Loop stops along the cable would limit the minimum and maximum capture loop sizes to approximately 3 inches at the smallest and 11 inches at the largest. The 285-pound or less capture loop breakaway device would help reduce non-target captures and also aid non-target animals to self-release if momentarily captured. Some additional usage restrictions being considered for this trap type include restricting their placement within 30 feet of hides, entrails, or carcasses. This restriction would minimize the chances of capturing non-target species that are natural scavengers. A final consideration would be to restrict trap placement to avoid the captured animal or the device from becoming entangled in any part of a fence, pole, or any woody vegetation that has a stem diameter greater than half an inch. This restriction would ensure the cable restraint functions correctly and would avoid injury to captured animals. As with foothold and foot enclosed trap types, having and using a catch pole or similar device would be required when checking cable restraint traps for releasing non-target captures. Corral traps are fully open-top devices designed to capture an animal and hold it alive. These traps are most often used for wild hog management. Corral traps are effective traps for capturing non-native wild hogs. The fully open tops allow for most non-target species such as bear, turkey, deer, and other smaller wildlife species to escape when captured. No placement or setback restrictions are being considered for this trap type. Currently, there are minimal restrictions on the types of traps that can be used for wild hog management. To reduce the potential impacts to non-target species and to improve species selectivity, trapping for the purposes of wild hog management would be restricted to the use of fully open-top corral traps. Cage traps are fully enclosed devices designed to capture an animal and hold it alive. Unlike corral traps, cage traps are fully enclosed, so trapped animals are not capable of escaping. Currently, there is no size restriction on cage traps. To reduce the chances of non-target wildlife captures such as deer and turkey, cage traps would be limited to a maximum size of 20 inches wide, 28 inches tall, and 60.5 inches long. This size restriction is intended to be large enough to capture target species, but small enough to minimize the chances of capturing non-target wildlife species such as bears or panthers. As with corral traps, no placement or setback restrictions are being considered for the use of cage traps. Potential changes would prohibit the use of snares that do not meet the requirements of a cable restraint we discussed earlier. Existing rules have minimal restrictions on these types of devices. Snares are often designed to kill a captured animal and are more likely to capture non-target species compared to cable restraints. In addition, existing rules have no restrictions on the use of glue traps. Potential changes would only allow the use of glue traps within an enclosed building, but not outdoors. This change would reduce the capture of non-target species, such as birds,